All right, here we are for the second one. Just a little walk with Jesus. It's Sunday, and as I walk this morning, reflect on the past week that's coming up and everything. And we get into this stuff about forgiveness. You see that we're supposed to forgive people, regardless of the situation. We're supposed to forgive people. And that's in reflection of, God forgiving us for all the stuff we do over and over again, over and over again. But yet, mercy and forgiveness, you know. And then when it comes to our fellow man and woman, you know, strangers, even family, we don't give that. But that's part of the first process and not being angry, Like I said, for me to die and an anger event was the last thing I did. And then come back being angry, that's not how I want to live life. I don't want to live life being angry. I don't want to die and have the last thing I did was something out of anger, I didn't get a chance, like I said, for me, some people, they know when they're going to die. So they can say, ooh, at the last second, I forgive you. Or people can ask for forgiveness, please forgive me. I didn't get that chance. So why live that way? The easiest thing to do is forgive and move on. And we say it's hard, but even that, people about turn the other cheek, How many times can you turn the other cheek, And it's not about somebody doing you dirty, somebody physically harming you. You don't let them physically harm you. But somebody do you wrong, you can forgive them. Now, the whole thing about it too is, once again, you can always remove yourself from a situation so they can't do you wrong again. That's the whole issue. You don't have to stay in a situation where people are doing you wrong, where somebody's doing you wrong, And sometimes we can't help the situation. Like when a stranger, you have many times where a stranger kills a family member, harms a family member. You see it in the court system where, people have this anger in them and they want this person to be punished, and they the trial takes 10 years. The trial takes 10 years and they carrying this for 10 years. And then the trial doesn't come out the way they think it should come out. And then they're angry now because it didn't come out the way, I want this person punished, And that becomes the whole thing where you guys are gonna be in the same boat. If you're being judged, guess what? You're being judged the same for not forgiving. I mean, so if you worry about the next life and your soul and your experience, and you want this person to go to hell, but guess what? By wishing that person to go to hell, you're in the same boat. You're in the same boat. So it seemed like the best thing to do is what? Forgive and move on. The anger's not gonna bring the person back. It's not gonna change the moment. It's not gonna do anything. So the best thing to do is forgive and move on. Once again, if it's somebody you gotta encounter on a regular basis, then guess what? Remove yourself from the situation. Somebody physically harm you, we can do things to help ourselves, and that's the other part. We can do things to help ourselves. So that's the other part about that. But once again, my advice is to unburden yourself. Forgive the person, move on. Place it in God's hands. Let it all work out for you. Let it all work out. But this anger, we gotta let that go. Vengeance, we gotta let that go. And really start to forgive. Really start to forgive and everything. So that's the Walk with Jesus talk of the day. If you don't get a chance to forgive before you die because you don't know when you're gonna die, then make sure you forgive. That way you ain't gotta worry about when you die. It's already taken care of. So anyways, take that with you. Have a blessed Sunday, have a blessed week, and we'll talk to you again soon.